APIs are definitely sprawling, and not to mention, organizations are creating APIs by massive dozens, teams after teams building stuff. The actual name for it from Bit comes from John Wheeler, who's a physicist, and he was the one who coined the term black hole. And one of his ideas from that paper of his is that everything in the universe, anything that's physical, basically comes from a bit of information. Coding part has become faster, it's become cheaper, and it costs nothing to prototype something.
Welcome to the DevReady podcast. Joining me on the DevReady podcast today, I have Rajeev Ramani. Rajeev, thanks for taking the time out of your morning to have a chat with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity, Anthony. Really happy to be here and be talking to you.
Thank you for that. For those of you that don't know how I run the podcast or what I do here, I've never actually met Rajeev before. It's the first time we're having a chat. So as I know little or nothing about him, besides what I saw on his quick website, I will let you take it away and explain to everyone who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So for about 20 years, I've worked on something most people never think about, the plumbing that lets one piece of software talk to another. That's basically what APIs are. And these are completely invisible. Nobody thanks you for doing it when it kind of works. It just happens in the back. And then now AI has showed up, and suddenly, the boring invisible layer becomes the most important thing that people use for building. So everyone's looking at AI. I'm looking at that, and kind of I'm looking at the wiring that makes all of this possible for business to actually use AI in some ways. Uh, the actual name for it from Bit comes from a John Wheeler, who's a physicist, and he was the one who coined the term black hole. And one of his ideas from that paper of his is that everything in the universe, anything that's physical, basically comes from a bit of information. So I kind of use that because I'm, in my opinion, what I'm trying to do is get bits of information across between different systems. So it's it from it.
I like that approach. So
Thanks.
with the term that we've got vibe coding, I think that's falling out of favor a little bit now, and it's more vibe engineering. People are calling it because it's a bit more. You need a plan before you do everything. Otherwise, you're just prompting an app into existence, and that's never going to give you a good result. But as someone that's been in the development space for almost 20 years, what I've understood is the development wasn't the skill; it was planning. The development was just learning how to speak another language so you can figure out how to get the computers to talk to each other effectively, in a really simple way of explaining it. But now that everyone's got this like universal translator and can write their own code without knowing principles of computer science and knowing what a data type is or how to manage memory or how to manage variables and all this other stuff, I can imagine now there's an influx. There's probably more APIs now or written in the last year that's probably ever been written in the history of programs.
That's right. Yeah. So I think one of the things that AI has done is for anyone who's trying to use AI, especially the examples that you're giving of folks who may not necessarily have the computer science or the software engineering backgrounds, trying to connect systems or connect, do something with their applications. Yes, 100%. Lots of APIs. Uh, and it just depends on what they've built, uh, and that makes it more and more in some ways scary as well. You see all these attacks that are happening around the world, and people being not don't necessarily know how to use those APIs, or how to actually construct them. So they give the instruction, it's a prompt, something gets built, output is there, and then the rest is just security and all that.
As long as they see the output or of what they intended to prompt, then I think most people are okay with that. But like I've seen cases where people have built a tool communicating with a third party API, and the secret keys are in the front end of the website, which then anyone who knows what they're doing can just inspect element or view the console and figure out how to find that stuff.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's surprising that so AI basically it's like the brain, right? So it can do wonderful things, but it doesn't necessarily know the right approach. So when you prompt it to build something, it just builds something for you. Unless you explicitly give it instructions to do and behave a certain way, that's it's going to do whatever you want it to do. And that's where someone, like me kind of plays a role in, I kind of understand that space really well. What does it require in API? I spent like last 20 years helping organizations shape their APIs, build what makes it secure, how to beat, things like that. So I think APIs are definitely sprawling, and not to mention, organizations are creating APIs by massive dozens, right? Teams after teams building stuff. So yeah, there's sprawl, there's, all these security complications that are definitely coming up. I completely agree.
Have you found that it's been challenging, probably working with non-developers, trying to explain these concepts to them, or just at a surface level, you say security and then they start panicking?
No, I try not to, yeah, it is definitely difficult because I think uh, the way the AI is projected, like if you see the YouTubes and the marketing that's out there, it's like, write your prompt and we'll build the application for you. And it's tempting, and it's, if I was a non-technical founder and I wanted to build something, it would take months, sometimes often years to come, something to kind of come to fruition based on what I wanted. Now it's a matter of minutes because you can log into Lovable and whichever platforms these are to build something. So I try not to scare them, but I definitely, there is a hard time explaining that there are certain things you want to do. There's certain ways you want to do it. And a lot of times they're receptive. So I try not to scare them because I don't think that helps. Yeah,
It's definitely not. But yeah, there is probably a big education component from your side because when you're talking to a developer or someone who's a programmer, they've got whether they're a very senior or junior, they're still going to have a concept of what they should be doing. Whether they follow it is a different story, but then how deep into that understanding again is how much experience they have. But they understand the concepts.
that's correct. Yes. So a lot of that, a lot of education, helping customers understand. So there's really two types of customers that I deal with. One is customers sitting inside enterprises. They have a different, unique set of challenges. They have people building all these applications that and end up exposing APIs. They see a sprawl problem. They see a gateway problem. They see things that, they've bought and invested in gateways that they can't really use right now. So they want to add in governance and control, adapt those gateways for this AI world. Then there's the other side, which is, a complete novice, smaller, medium enterprises who are kind of trying to understand how to use this AI. So I want to use AI, but I don't necessarily know how to go about doing it. Uh, is it just use the chat interface on ChatGPT and get something out? So helping them kind of, understand how to leverage AI. How do you take that one first repetitive problem that you're doing, spending time day after day? That's my, two worlds that I'm kind of generally constantly juggling between the two. Yeah,
And I think on that other side is how to leverage AI to actually benefit a business. Is it's a bigger conversation to be had because a lot of people just think, all right, AI is the buzzword. That's all you've heard for the past 3 years now.
that's correct.
But you really need to understand where in your business does it fit. You can't just shove it in and hope for the best.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I think I have so many of these conversations where, there is this need, we need an agent. And I'm like, okay, yes, you need an agent for sure. But let's just talk about, talking to your team members and seeing where are they actually spending a lot of their times, repetitive tasks that you can automate. Those are your first real quick wins that really show you the value of AI, to your team members, to your organization, and you can really quickly, iterate over those to get to a point where agents make sense and, things that you want to do, what is being marketed out there, really start to make sense within the organizations. But a lot of times the value is the incremental value of doing something really small that takes away somebody's pain within a team, within an organization, within a process, automating that using AI, and then slowly building on top of that.
And from what I've found, where it's become sort of like that automation process, it's more of an actual automation, not AI, because
Yeah,
a lot of people don't realize whether it's an LLM and you're just getting a chat response, or if you start introducing an agent, you don't control how it does the steps or the process. It's repeatable, but Out of 100 times, it could approach it 100 different ways. And generally, when you've got a manual process in a business and you want to streamline it, it's a repeatable process because the person does it the same way every time. You need the same thing. So it's not AI first. It's really understanding, all right, we've got this process. We can automate. Let's use NAN or Zapier. And then that may get you 99% of the way there. And there's one step where you may have a human saying, all right, we have to triage something and determine does it go into A, B, or C. And you've got natural text you need to read. Perfect use case to slot an LLM in there and save that person into a workflow. But you don't just go, here, agent, here's all the information, and this is the output. Because you're not going to get the result you want. And it's not going to be consistent, repeatable, and reliable.
100%. You kind of taken you're saying something that was like in my I want to say this as well, which is that, one of the things that I see is that traditionally APIs were, two deterministic systems talking to each other. Now all of a sudden you have this one side which is like really smart but completely unpredictable. And on the other side, the requirement is that it has to be deterministic. Like you can't, for example, you every time you invoice someone, that invoice has to be correct. It cannot be.
Yeah.
You would love that to be, as imaginative as possible, but that's not going to be, that doesn't work. So you're absolutely right. So it's kind of looking at these systems, breaking them down, looking at what can be automated, and then figuring out where in that process does an LLM actually fit, and how do you then fit in. I'm sure you guys at DevReady are kind of seeing this across the landscape as well. Yeah,
We were pitching an AI ready concept 3 years ago to clients, and we ended up finding that they don't have enough systems in place to automate, let alone replace it with AI. Because that's the first thing is a lot of businesses just run because that's the way they've been doing things, and there's processes in place because staff operate that way. But then they don't have the systems or the tools that will allow you to either integrate with an AI and have the APIs to then communicate to it and let it do those things. The AI can't grab a sticky note off a computer or shift paper from one tray to the other or whatever the process is.
exactly. So one of the things that I will kind of work with organizations is, so yes, you have APIs. Yes, great. But are they really things that, if you want to, for example, integrate an agent, can it really use your API? Is it in a shape that it can understand? Unlike a human, where you could give it a API documentation, it can read the document. The human or I can read the documentation, and I can say, okay, hit the API, and I see that actually there's a small difference between what the documentation says and what the code actually responds, and I can adapt the application to that, to those things. Agent has no way of knowing that or doing that. So, your APIs, how they're documented, how they're structured, how does the agent actually learn those skills in order to use those APIs? All of this like a completely different paradigm that's kind of, shaping up how this whole conversation goes with organizations. So one of the things that I do is kind of help them figure out how to get this, process ready so that they can get to a point where AI actually makes sense and can be more predictable in how it behaves with with your systems.
And that's really important because the predictability is key, especially when you're running a business. Like the invoice example you mentioned. Yeah, you don't want to invoice someone 10,000 when you're meant to be 1,000. You'd
Exactly.
love to do it and get that money, but that's not possible. And that's where I think human oversight has to come into 99% of use cases when you're using an agent, especially an agent flow, if you're letting it be non-deterministic and letting it figure it out all on its own. If it's an automation step with an LLM along the way, you can build the checks and balances in as the next step after the LLM responds, and you can verify stuff. So you probably don't need as much human insight oversight on that one. But when it's an agent and it can do everything on its own and you're giving it a goal, definitely going to need some oversight and not let that just go straight out of the business without any human checks.
100%. That was another thing that I actually had written down on my in my list of points as well, which was that, the thing that organizations really have to worry about is what is it that the LLM can access? And what does it, it's really smart. It can do stuff, but what can it access? How can it access it? And what can it do with that information? And that's where, you decide, how important that information is and the actions that it can take and you inject the human basically into that process, so that, exactly like you said, right? Somebody had to be invoiced 500 and you ended up giving them $50,000 bill. Not great for your business. It'll kind of fold overnight when stuff like that happens. And so a lot of the conversations, at least for now, it starts with AI, but it goes to some things that are more fundamental in nature, in kind of understanding the business process, how does the organization do things, and then slotting, automation, and then AI on top of that, where it's required. And a lot of times, I find that automation works incredibly well, and there's no real reason to inject an LLM into that process in some cases. Yeah.
Yeah, most steps don't need that level of computation to figure something out.
Yeah.
From my example, yes, if you're triaging an email or trying to draft a document or responding to something, that's a perfect use case because it's natural language. And I've seen people try to use LLMs to do like maths or accounting, and it's definitely going to get it wrong because they're not made to do calculations.
They're not. Yeah.
You've got a high chance of failure there. But I think it comes down to understanding exactly like you said, the fundamentals of what's the business trying to do, what are the steps in that process, what's the outcome, what's the data involved to get from A to the outcome of Z, and then what can be automated and what can't. Sometimes you can't automate anything.
And that's okay. That's absolutely okay. And you have to be, you have to be okay with that. And one of the things that as a consultant I have to do is to ensure that I can call that out and say that, this thing doesn't make sense. You have someone doing the job, and I don't think this process should be automated. Sometimes it goes well with the customer, sometimes it doesn't for whatever reason. But I think, the the way the whole AI is pitched to the business is that it can basically solve all your problems. And you'll see YouTube videos after YouTube where they just kind of build something and it works. I think it's like 1 or 2% of the use cases, at least based on everything that I've seen. It doesn't work that way. The amount of plumbing you need to put in place for an agent to work correctly, predictably, it's very high. And that's where I think that I was worried about AI kind of doing this, taking this role of mine, but I think it's made my role more or less more load bearing than than what I had anticipated. So it's pushed a lot of that onus of uh, you know uh, wiring and piping that is required in order for the LLM to really do what it can do.
I think probably an example you can probably map it to what it's doing versus what the people's roles are shifting is if you think of like a seamstress or someone that used to sew. The person that could sew could put the clothing together. That could get replaced with a sewing machine that someone operates.
Mm.
But before that person sews or the sewing machine is used, someone has to cut up the pattern and has to tell you what you're actually putting together. And that does not change. You still need the plan, you need the architecture, and you need the approach. Because writing code was never the complex part. Writing code was the time consuming part because it's slow to press buttons on a keyboard.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, when I type, I type ahead of myself. I think faster than I can type. So I've got typos because of that. But the problem is I'm thinking about what I need to do next as I'm doing that one. So I'm planning and thinking ahead. And that's the important bit is can you plan, can you understand, and you know the direction you're going?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's so true for anything related. So even in my experience, so one of the things that I'm kind of working on the side is, a couple of open source projects, and I use AI quite heavily for that. But 90% of my time is kind of going into that PRD, what should the end user experience be, and kind of really nailing that down because like you said, I think the coding part it's become faster, it's become cheaper, and it costs nothing to prototype something.
Yep.
So that was never the problem, like you said. I think where it's really helped me is, getting that plan together in a way that I can understand and I can, pass on that information to the LLM to design what it needs to do. But it again goes back to fundamentals. Like I wrote a blog post like around a year back when Claude had just started, was that you know the tendency for using AI ends up being that you uh, you still need a lot of, if you're working, for example, on Rust or any of these programming languages, you have to know the language in order for the LLM to be able to build things that you want it to. I can't see that not happening, right? Where I am completely oblivious to what is happening and it just does something. Those choices, those architectural decisions, someone needs to make those. And I think that, is still a very human, experience that is required in order to build something credible.
While yeah, everyone says the AI knows everything because it's been trained on everything, there is still a lot of information that and decisions that are made that are internal to organizations that are not clear, and that's probably more talking about when you're talking at scale. So, Google, Facebook, Uber, those giant companies have solved problems that people don't even know about, and they haven't documented them in their public engineering blogs, where you get a lot of information, but there's a lot more stuff that's hidden, and that's the stuff that. But most people don't need to get to that level either,
Correct. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
which is it's a bit of a trade-off.
It is like, the thing about AI uh, is that you need to know how to use it effectively. You don't have to be an LLM specialist. The field is so vast. It's so big, from hardware down to, quantizations, all that. It's for 90% of us, we don't necessarily need to know all of that, but we need to know how to use it, when to use it, what's the best way to use it. And I think if that can be packaged well for organizations to understand, especially smaller organizations, I think there's a lot of value in that for people to just get started, to identify how do they actually go about using this AI that's come on to this world.
My best use case is using it for brainstorming. It's I've got an idea. Now I've got a second person I can bounce the idea off and evolve it before I take it to the team. Because then you will do that with the team and then waste 3-4 hours. Where I can quickly iterate, get some, all right, my idea was crap, or my that thought I was going down doesn't work, that's actually better. All right, let's evolve that. And then now this is the solution I think we should go with, and then get some other people's opinions.
Oh man, yes. I can't tell you the number of times I have just keyed in a sentence or said something out loud to just get, some feedback. And one of the things as a consultant is kind of I'm working for myself. So, I don't have easy ways to bounce ideas off other people, and they're busy in their own world. I have friends who can, but that, this interaction that I can get is, you've hit the nail on the head, right? It's an amazing interaction. We can instantly get, things, and you can ask it to argue cases on both sides,
Yeah.
and so kind of frame things up, and you can quickly validate that idea. And yeah, absolutely, that's a fantastic use case for to get started. Yes, absolutely. Any business, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like compared to what we probably used to do, if you're in the tools where Stack Overflow was the ultimate resource that everyone used to use, when you went there though, there was a lot of negative comments. Figure it out yourself. You're not asking right. I'm not going to answer that because you should know. Or like, but then occasionally you'd have to view 50 posts to find the one nugget that was useful. So it's while that resource is lost and it's probably harder to get that knowledge through humans, you probably don't need that sort of structure anymore just because you've got this 24/7 permanent thing that you can keep going and you can have 100 discussions at once about different ideas. But like you said, it's understanding, yeah, knowing how to use it so you can then get the discussions on both sides and you can argue for and against to refine an idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, Stack Overflow is amazing. And you're right. Combing through those responses could be a pain.
It's hours sometimes
And
to
yeah, yeah.
copy and paste a bit of code
Which,
that almost worked and you
yes,
have to didn't know what you were doing
that's
to get it working.
that's right. That's right. I love that, so I was trying to learn Rust at some point, and I was using, and I was struggling because Rust is not an easy language to use. And then Claude came along around that time, and I picked up a project to do, and then, that's later on become my open source project. But, I used that as a foothold to learn Rust. And my experience was like, it was mind-boggling, right? I could ask it to explain like one piece of line of code, and, it didn't have to shout back at me that I was dumb
Yeah.
and a lot of that. So I think it's definitely it's done wonders to the world. It's also added a lot of chaos, a lot of, I suppose, confusion.
A lot of fog, a lot of yeah misstatements, and people. I think the hype is high, especially people on LinkedIn and YouTube and these AI influencers, as people call them. And I'm sure if you've ever scrolled through LinkedIn, you've seen leave a comment of X and I'll share this, the one ultimate agent playbook for NAN that'll run your whole business. And that doesn't serve anyone. That's just people trying to get clicks. And it's misleading to people who don't know and don't have the time to spend understanding what is beyond the ChatGPT box that I type in every day, or I typed once in 2004 or 2024 and it stopped working. And then I never tried it again.
Yeah, that's correct. I think there's another thing that I'm finding quite a bit is, a lot of people share their repos now. So there's like just an influx of these repos of things that people are doing. It's good in some cases, it's things that you want, but it's also very confusing. And LinkedIn is, every day my feed is 90% people doing amazing stuff, kicking goals with AI. I'm just based on conversations that I'm having, I'm not sure how much of that is real versus how much of that is just, hype.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of hype because there's a lot of this. I see that on TikTok I use for that sort of information as well. And it's 5 to 10 different repositories that are being shown to me every day. Oh, here's a new thing that does this. And then there's 1,000 variations of OpenClaw that people have made.
Yeah, everybody has their own tools that they invent, and that's got to go, absolutely bonkers. Uh, but yeah, coming back to, I suppose, APIs and AI, I think APIs are definitely back with a bang in many ways in terms of, how they're needed for everything that AI must do. AI by itself will write an essay for you, but if it needs to talk to anything else outside the world, it's got to have APIs through MCPs or whatever.
But definitely, and then just because you said MCPs there, people probably think that's something new. That's just an API
But that's just an API.
that is specific for AI to use. It's no different. It still needs authentication, still has to have inputs and outputs. You still have to process it on your end the same way. It's just another name for it, effectively.
It is, and it is again being marketed in a totally different way. And there's a lot of now debate going on between MCP, CLI, and APIs and all that. But I think you just have to find what works for best for you, given your organizational context, what you need out to get done, in order to, be able to use AI effectively. And if you need it, yes, absolutely.
And especially if you need it. It's not just jump on the bandwagon because you can't put your head in the sand either, because it is there and it's not going to go away. It's here now. Even if all the frontier labs and all the companies in China stop producing new models, what we have is good enough to continue for years to come. And it's not going to go away. Like the genie's out of the bottle, as they say. This is now what we have to deal with. So it's understanding how do you use it, and then from my best advice to anyone that doesn't know much about AI is just start using ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. Just start chatting to it. The more you use it, the more ideas you'll get, and then you'll connect different dots in your head on what could be possible. Because a lot of people don't have the time to look at it. And then even APIs, they've probably heard the term. Just ask that what an API is, and then that starts the journey.
Absolutely. And it'll give you some wonderful interpretations of, how to understand what an API is. Uh, but yeah, I think people should definitely start using. Yeah, it'll be foolish not to use it because it offers value. It offers things that you can do. All you need to do is make sure you're safe. You're using your organizational information safely, even your own personal information safely. But it's there. It definitely people should definitely use it. And make sense of it. Yeah, absolutely.
So, what's some advice you can give to some of the listeners out there if they are building their own prototypes and apps internally and don't have developers on staff or in background in their own business? What's something you can advise there, especially on that API side?
If you're looking to use AI or you're trying to understand whether you should use AI or not, the most important thing, if you're especially within the organizational context, start with the smallest repetitive problems that you are constantly facing. And your employees would have told you things that are repetitive. And kind of look at that one problem where that could be a starting point for use of AI. It may mean AI, it may mean automation, But either ways, that could be your first start towards getting into this AI space. It could be even a question to an LLM to see if this process can be automated in the first place, or can it be leveraged with using AI? And it will quite predictably give you a pretty honest answer of whether certain things can be done or not. So I think that's where I would ask most organizations to kind of start with. Pick that one annoying repetitive task, ask information the AI would need to do it, and where that information lives. And if you know where that information lives, that's also maybe your first API that you can expose and kind of let the AI kind of use it. So that would be your first real win. That would be the one advice that I can give organizations.
Okay. And that's something that you should take on board and follow that approach. And then, yeah, if you're not using AI, get the AI to help you. Just tell it to be, after it gives its first response, just tell it to be a little bit cynical and tell you why it wouldn't work this as a second response, and then make a decision.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. AIs are the brain, right? And your APIs are basically your nervous system.
Yeah, and you just need a steerer to get it to work in the right way. Just before we wrap up, I just wanted to touch on, you mentioned that you've learned Rust and you have an open source project. What is that project?
So the project is called Flowplane, and it's essentially a control plane. So the idea was that, I've worked with API gateways extensively across with Google, with Kong, etc. And one of the things that I realized was that, those things were built prior to AI age. And in the AI world, there's a whole set of problems that customers don't know. For example, if they have APIs, what is the contract of those APIs? So Flowplane was kind of designed as a, multi-tenanted platform, completely open source. Run your API, uh, send requests through. It'll understand your APIs. It'll generate an open API spec. You can then decide whether you want to expose it as a tool or not, and do all the gateway things. Plus, this more cloud native, or sorry, AI native kind of experience. So that's what that product is for, and it's open source on the yeah.
It's probably a bit beyond most of the listeners to use something like that. But yeah, I can see the technical problem it assists with.
Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Rajeev, if anyone else wants to find out more about you, how can they do that?
Reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, Rajeev Ramani. I also have a website called itfrombit.com.au. You can look me up there. Yeah, and then just DM me. I've got like callback links and all that on the website. And yeah, DM me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to catch all of.
We'll add all that to the show notes. Once again, Rajeev, it's been an awesome chat. It's good speaking to like another AI consultant or a consultant that is very familiar with AI and actually shares the same approach and values to how to advise businesses, because there's a lot of people out there that don't follow that approach. And we talked about the people that are hyping things up and just doing ridiculous things across social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thank you very much for this opportunity. I absolutely enjoyed the conversation. You know, it's great to kind of talk to like-minded people and, share ideas and bounce ideas off. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. All right.